Good morning, Bhupinder, and thank you for joining Twimbit on this initiative for open banking and to understand what open banking is about. The idea behind of having this fire chat kind of a concept is basically to make sure that all of us understand this phenomena right now of open banking, what are the noises around it, what it actually means, and at the end of the day, how it is really changing this banking, dynamics as such. So, without further ado, I would like Bhupinder to introduce himself. I'm really honored to have you with us, and you are one of my first leadership forum, activity leaders, and it's really, really a pleasure. But just a brief about you and also what your company does as such.
Thanks, Minakshi, for having me on this your Twimbit platform for speaking on open banking. To be honest, it's my privilege and honor to speak to you and share something which we from my company Openitio and personally myself been doing in the space of open banking based out of UK and Europe. And open banking, as you said, is a phenomena. I truly believe in that. Honestly, I feel it's a revolution because the way I see it is it's going to change the relationship of banking with the consumer and the dynamics. And obviously, it's going to bring more computation, better products and services. And above all, the concept of data sharing, which I think has been revolutionized by obviously social media, but now I believe that we are ready to go to the next chapter of data sharing, but with a control and secure mechanism. So yeah, I mean, happy to discuss. Thanks. So this is a good platform. Yeah.
Great. So you are at the cusp of the whole open banking and API-driven banking system. So one of the things that I really wanted to understand is actually what is open banking. If somebody wants to understand that, okay, now the banking is moving to open banking scenario. When it comes to a consumer, the consumer would not always be in clarity what it is. So if in a very simple term, I want to understand what open banking is about and what is the role that API plays in it?
Sure. So the term open banking is kind of a bit of confusing from customer standpoint of your consumer. The reason being why I said that is, first of all, I mean, the proper terminology, if anybody want to use, is probably regulated open banking, although it's a bit overstretched. But the problem is when somebody says open, the first thing comes to anybody's mind like, oh, what does it mean? Anybody, everybody, anywhere? Frankly speaking, is entirely opposite. It's not anybody, everybody. It's somebody who got some rights to access some data. So it's exactly opposite. So the problem, again, as I said, like open banking gonna give more control, and obviously it's gonna bring some, technology standards, regulatory standards, and security standards into play to make sure that the realization of open banking is lived up to its mission vision. Because the problem is, when we hear this term open, we get a bit of frenzy and get all sort of, I would say, weird ideas and thoughts. And to some extent, it's right also, because as a human being and a consumer, we are always cautious about what we use and how we use. And for that reason, sometimes it plays negatively or bad on the consumer. And sometimes the big banks, which obviously sometimes resist this change of open banking, they use it to their advantage. So whenever I talk about open banking, I say it's not really what it sounds like. It's a much sophisticated way of data sharing. It's much sophisticated way of controlling your data points, and inherently you will get much better product and services out of it. So how do we do it? Yeah, like before we talk about how do we do it in open banking scenario or the things which we are doing here, I think it's important to understand the concept of data sharing existed as long as the internet is there, right? I would say it probably started with the dot-com boom when the internet websites started coming. The inherent requirement of data gathering, marketing, and all those tools needed to, get a sneak peek into customers' profiles. So the concept of data sharing or data aggregation is not new, but means have changed. So I think the analogy could be the trains, the way of the trains evolved, right, from steam engine to diesel and then electrical trains, right? It's the same thing, but now we use a term called APIs, which is saying that we have like a standards defined, which when I say standard means from it can be two angles, right? One is the people who are building the application software, like in the computer world, right? So API stand for application programming interface. It's a way of saying that, okay, we have defined some standards, and those standards can be implemented across technology agnostic, platform agnostic, and anybody who is legally has the rule to or role to access or consume those API endpoints should be allowed to. So again, just reversing back, I said, like the data sharing concept existed, and we have seen a lot of application even today which use the similar concept of aggregation of your bank accounts, but they use what we call screen scraping. It's a it has to be there because the requirement or demand for these specialized services was always there. So the screen scraping is what is the de facto way of doing or gathering data, but it comes with a lot of risk and a lot of security challenges. And then on top of it, it's not a standard. So yeah, so so concept is not new. But the API way of doing things, which has been standardized, that's something which is a new way of data sharing. And because of this new framework, the companies and the technology companies can have better controls, can have better transparency, even the better availability. So that's how I summarize open banking and why it is and where we are. And as the concept of data sharing did existed, but not in this way.
Right. So what I have understood till date that APIs were generally used earlier by banks as well, but it was morely focused towards internal efficiencies and making your functions agile and making sure that you're able to respond to certain operational needs. But now this role has changed as per and it's kind of driving the scenario on future of banking. Okay, great. So if I want to understand this, when you say data sharing has changed, so how has data evolved as such? As in, is the capturing of data now better? Are the banks aware that what they need to capture? And apart from the data scraping concept, is it that the banks are able to capture the right data and then use that data to facilitate this concept of open APIs and banking, making more personalized through it?
To be honest, I think the data, the type of data is not changed. Let's just go back to what it means, right? So as a consumer, my relationship with a bank is a bank account as the first part, right? We do have other products and services, but let's focus on the first thing which anybody on earth will have with a bank. Whether you have a student account or child account, and so the first relationship which anybody will have with a bank, will be a current account kind of thing. I'd be surprised if anybody can apply for mortgage before having all those, or credit card, right? So the data which is produced as a part of having that bank account is what is in the scope of, at least in our first wave of open banking, right? So it inherently means that, okay, so again, accounts can be your personal accounts, or it could be business accounts. So that's the first point of the data origin, data creation, and subsequently the uses of data can be inferred from the transactional information. Now it sounds very simple, but as the businesses or even our personal banking get complex over the period of years, we forget, or it's very hard to understand what all things are happening in my bank account, right? honestly, even if you ask me, I wouldn't know what are the top 10 transactions from my bank account going out every month. Okay, other than saying that, yes, I vaguely remember this is the thing which is going on that day. Now, so we used to get our monthly statements, right? Now, I think we all are trying to stay planet Earth, so paper statement is kind of no. Now we want e-statements, and prior to that, we were asked, go check the website and see what you have used or spent or what's your in and out. So in that sense, the data is not changed. Honestly, it's the same data which was captured. I don't know, as long as banking existed, our transaction information. Maybe it got a bit enriched. Say, for example, if you are using a banking mobile app, they might, when you use mobile app. So the other angle which come into play is that your mobile can capture your location information or merchant information. So a little bit of enhancement on the data, the data which is captured by the bank, but they have started thinking how to use it, whatever they have. Again, so this is I would say just learning out of the social media curve which we have lived through. Social media, social platform have made money out of just gathering information and selling or advertising, right? The same concept obviously could be applied to any other industry, because we are consumers and we are gonna be influenced by advertisement or good products and everything. So banks are obviously forced to think that if there is a better way of communicating with the consumer, and again, the consumers have changed, right? So I wouldn't be the same consumer as my parents and my grandparents, right? So you need to keep that also into factor. I like to know what it is like my monthly bill. I wouldn't invest in 5-year, 20-year plans. I would probably be looking at investing in monthly by month. So my needs have changed, right? As a consumer. So banks obviously have to move with the pace, with the type of the consumer expectation is. And one of the problems which comes with the banking is most of the bank have, I would say, very old platforms. When I say old, they are like older than my grandparents probably. So we call it legacy. Now, yes. I'm not against legacy, but legacy comes with its a debt, right? You have to make legacy to legend, right? And in order to do that, you need to move things quickly. And as soon as all those equations are put forward in front of a big bank, they struggle, trust me. It's very hard to publish a new product or when I say hard, in terms of timelines, right? Competitive timelines. The amount of time and effort it will take a big bank to launch a new product, it's amazingly big as compared to any, I would say, challenger bank, for example. They can move nimble, agile. So in that aspect, I was like, data is not change, is how you're going to use the data, and can you use the data actually in first place, right? So that's the kind of challenges which banks, our current incumbent banks are facing, in terms of the needs and the services which they can offer and remain relevant. So as of now, they hold the trump card because we all bank with major banks. We still seek stability. We still seek, control and think that they are the best guardian of our data. So keeping all in mind, now with the new managers, probably the new technology, probably, and the new regulations again on top of it, is making them think. Okay, so in my view, it's not the data which has changed; it's the function of the data has changed, right? And we are all influenced, right? So banks need to do the right thing, is to use their data and come up with interesting products, or even come with a product which probably need in 6 months' time, not now, future.
Right.
Yeah.
So you say one interesting thing is that the consumer has changed, right? And it's also something that we have also found. So for example, when I speak to some of the banking execs, what they come up and say is now our consumer or our customer is very open to share their data. They say that, okay, I just need to know that what this data is going to be used for. Have you come across this kind of a sentiment among consumers that they are actually willing? As per my view, I think more than 6 or 7 out of 10 consumers would be willing to share the information if given a chance, and they know that what kind of information is going to be used for. So have you also come across on that aspect? And that's something which is, one of the interesting things that you mentioned, that the consumer has changed. So there's a confidence in the consumer.
Absolutely, Meenakshi. See, thing is that I mean, again, you need to think about this like a geographical phenomena as well. And it's simple, right? If you live in a big metropolitan city, you gonna have reaches which not a rural village will have, right? In terms of accessibility and exposure to new things and concepts. So definitely, me personally, my banking have changed with what I was doing probably 10 years, 15 years ago, and the same influence is seen. But the thing is that the proliferation of banking, it will depend on how far the consumer is in the banking system. I mean, we know that there are a lot of unbanked globally, right? It's not specific to Western countries, or sorry, Asian countries. It's also common in Western countries as well. It's a surprising. I mean, the first world countries have unbanked. I mean, honestly, at this stage, it's a shocker. But yes, I mean, I've seen some of the fintechs who really want to say that actually, why are these people unbanked? A typical example is, the people who live on cash. They do, the blue collar jobs. They don't have a fixed count or fixed employment. So typically, those are the kind of people who sometimes don't have a proper bank account for all these needs, and they live from cash to cash. What I say, they go to what we call is pawn shops if they have a checks and get the checks cashed. But again, the consumer, if he lives in an area which is vastly exposed and area which is vastly influenced, yes, we will have we will have better understanding of why we should adopt it or why should I use it, right? So sentiment is there, and I can tell you probably the sentiment which we share in Europe for open banking in major cities is probably comparable to APAC, like for example Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, So all these countries are now thinking because consumer has changed definitely, and with I say I see it as a natural evolution of data sharing, right? We don't care about now. I mean, I don't know how many people out of 100 will care. Facebook is using my data to make some money, right? We all know now that they quantify each of us as a dollar figure against us, right?
Yeah.
The more we hit likes and see ads, that's it, right? So we have been already, what I call is we have done the crash course, at least the generation which is probably like our age group, and we have gone through that, I would say seismic shift, seeing that what was before this and before the social media and now. So I think we are more keen and I think more open to this concept as compared to our older generation, probably our parents' generation.
Right.
The people who are born in, I would say, post 2000 or .com era, they probably gonna be even one step ahead of us, because for them the world is what they're seeing from the after the .com internet. I mean, again, the comparison is internet speed on dial-up mode and now fiber and broadband. So data sharing to them come very naturally. To our generation, I would say come by learning and going through these natural evolution steps. But I think these two generations are definitely gonna have a different mindset easily to consume any new product and service. I have a couple of apps which does aggregation for me on my mobile. And I can check it whenever I want to. Right? So certainly, I think this has, made a big change, and consumers are ready to, as you said, that with the control. Absolutely. So again, open banking, which is regulated or regulated open banking, whatever the way we. The word regulated is important because that gives the trust to the consumer that somebody has thought about it, right? It's not going to be like I would say mad rush to accessing the data. It's not open file. Sure, we might encounter some setbacks while open banking happen because it's a new technology. Okay, so let's be honest, right? And every new technology will come with some risk. Now, what I can tell you from my experience in Europe, I haven't heard a single case of open banking system have been hacked or bank having hacked. So that means that somebody has done good standards, and so it's still a couple of years. but I haven't heard a bad story about open banking. So those things, obviously motivate consumers to try new products. And if it means sharing data, of course, but as with the control.
Right. So I would, in a nutshell, say that we are now understanding the use of or extending the use of APIs and understanding how to use data, which was already there previously, is kind of an enabler to this open banking system, which actually acts to the reimagining of the banking. And one of the challenges that you said was the legacy system which exists, and which, that is something which even I have found in one of the papers that I worked on, is that it's very hard to implement any agile or any new interactive system because of the backend infrastructure, which is very, legacy based. Recently, I was reading somewhere that I think one of the largest banks in Canada is going to invest a huge amount of money to now revamp their, whole infrastructure amount. And this is happening because, and imagine a place like Canada, I would say that as digital adoption, it would be very fast-paced as compared to a country like India or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh. But yeah, that's of course one of the things. But if I look at the drivers, and you interestingly touched upon the fact of banking the unbanked, right? So what is driving this open banking? Why is so much of noise there? What are the challenges, if I put it in a different way, that open banking is trying to solve? Banking the unbanked is one which you have mentioned, and I would love to know about how it plans to do so and what would be the impact of it, and any other drivers that you think is pushing this growth for open banking.
Sure, certainly. So let me tell you something interesting about Canada. I involved in something in Canada, what we call Open Banking Initiative Canada. So I am a co-chair of Open Banking Initiative Canada, along with few peers from Canada who I started talking, I would say, over 2 years now. And the reason was simple. The Canadian counterparts were looking to UK and Europe and say that, okay, what it is, how it is. And I think probably the same question which we are discussing right now. Interestingly, Canada is not ahead of Asia. They are behind. Okay. So Asia is probably beating them fair and square. And recently, it looked like they hit another blocker. Because of this COVID-19, some of their initiatives in Canada have been, I would say, put on a back burner. And unfortunately, open banking happened to be one of them, I believe. Right? There was some initial traction last year. There was some movement in the what we call is Canadian regulators, and the government was looking into it. But because of this COVID-19, things in Canada at least have kind of I would say paused, not stopped, but paused. And they need to catch up, honestly. And our initiative in Canada is trying to bring the I would say use cases, the knowledge, and trying to apply it locally in Canada for the local consumption, right? So there is a big opportunity. The banks are good, but again, the problems which we have seen in Europe, they exist everywhere, right? How do you share? How do you control? So they need to solve all those problems. Now, the other interesting part, which you said, is why this demand. I think, okay, so it's not just the unbanked, right? It could be as simple as that. We, consumer, have multiple kind of bank accounts or multiple relationships, right? So currently, we in Europe are only dealing with what we call current accounts. But that's not where it stops. That's where it starts, right? We want to move to what we are trying. I think the world is terming it as like open finance world, where we see the product and services, not the provider. So there is this new concept of banking as a service. Bank would not exist, banking will. I think this is what Bill Gates said, right? So there are a lot of interesting things happening. We wouldn't get rid of banking. No. Probably the what we call is decomposition of banking need to happen, right? And again, this thought of banks know best for the consumer, like a single organization, that need to be challenged a bit. That's not true. And to be honest, that is what probably has caused some of the problems what we face today, right? Because they feel obliged as a bankers that they know best for the consumer, and as long as anybody is working for the bank, big bank, they think that they are the best people or custodian of the data. Now, unfortunately, that's not true. Given that if data is surfaced to fintech community, they can do much better job in some of the use cases, and the use cases might be investing. I mean, there are nice concept coming out of this. Is like, I mean, I heard concept of penny investment, right? Because you can move so easily from bank account to bank account with a minimal transaction fee. Even penny investments have been coined. Like, you can invest in stocks or shares on daily stock, because money movement has been made simple also with open banking. So it's not just the aggregation side. The use cases of what we call is personal finance management, give a consumer a projection. That's one half. The second half, so that is the half which probably give insights to the fintechs. Now, companies have applied artificial intelligence models to predict habits or future spending needs, those kind of concepts. But the other aspect is the money movement. Like, how do we move money? I think one other thing which has been kind of not made much obvious, we have been predominantly being card-based consumers. We have been spending, shopping using cards, right? That's the mode of spending. Now, what's the alternative? None, right? As of now. But yes, open banking is the alternative, which just basically means the relationship between A and B, and that A and B happen to be the merchant and the consumer, right? Not the card company, which make obviously the transaction fees. So that is the big fundamental, the push in Europe at least, that it's not that they're throwing card companies out. They're saying it's been a bit too monopolistic. They need to have a challenger, and open banking is the second big channel which gonna make money, right? From small transaction to big transaction to, I mean, you can think of all the banking, payment use cases, direct debits or standing orders, recurring payments. So all those use cases now are between a bank account A and the B. There is no middleman, and that gives a cost saving, first of all, because in any industry where there is a middleman, there is a cost involved. Nothing comes out. So that's the second thing. Money movement has changed. We approve things at the click of our thumb, or from the mobile device. We get push notification. Now that's really exciting thing to have. Like, I think we all were annoyed when we used to get push notification for ads and this and that. But I think we feel even secured and controlled when we say, have you approved this transaction for this much money for that's the kind of information surfacing out right in your hands, which you can use and you can consume, or in the consumption in the sense like approve or deny at that time. So that those kind of use cases are coming normal now, right? We are now used to that concept. We are not now thinking that we need to log into our bank account to make a payment, and that's all gone. It's all on our fingertips in the mobile device which we carry around. So mobile, to be honest, has to be one of the key factors also to think that the medium which is really shaping up the consumption of open banking. We don't want to rely on desktop branches or anything. We just want to do banking through our mobile, just like we use social media, right? So that's how I see that the things of APIs, again, coming back to the APIs, they are designed to help enable this what we call open banking or mobile banking also, right? And the kind of use cases which I just touched upon is phenomenal, right? And it would not stop with just with the banking, right? When I say banking, not the current account, your mortgages, your saving accounts, insurances, investment. Like, this is just the beginning, So I think we as a civilization will move into the era where we wouldn't know probably who the provider is. We would only know that, that's the app. It's trustworthy, it's regulated. I should trust it and just follow its guidelines, right? Or its uses.
Yeah. I think this has been a big success in India, if I see, at least in the payment part, with UPI actually, driving this so well. And now that WhatsApp is also trying to launch their own payment system, and it's because now it will become a reality that I don't even need to log in into an app. I just use my social media, services to do all of these, and I would really feel secure if it at one place. I know all my aggregated information and everything at one application. I know all my transactions, as you said, right? The push notification coming, and I just said yes, and it's done. It's easier. And the way we got to use Google Pay, and now the other forms of payment like PayPal or Paytm, etc., was that incentivization that they have done. Now I know if in India there's we have all these tea stalls, local tea stalls, right? They also use Google Pay, and they ask us to do Paytm. It's not the brick and mortar stores that are asking to do only. It's a very interesting change, which I haven't seen. I think payment needs a lot of development in the European or the Western sector of the world, which has really worked well in the Indian sector, because this is something that was coming out as a very interesting theme in some of the events and seminars that I have been attending. That UPI is the best example for any of these Western countries to follow. Actually, that was something that was interesting.
No, absolutely, Minakshi. See, you'd be surprised that UPI is comparable to one of the best payment systems developed anywhere in the world. Okay, there are a few others, and it has been referred widely. But it is an interesting thing which you need to know. UPI is, more the way I see it is like the money movement platform, which is enabling like a company like Paytm or Google Pay probably, or even WhatsApp in India, right? So they are moving money a bit differently than what the open banking standards are. So the idea is, it's about consumer taking conscious decisions. So the way I differentiate is, there's a front channel, there's a back channel, right? The front channel is probably typically is like when you as a consumer log into the website or use a mobile app. That's the front channel, right? Where you see things or where you action things or trigger things, right? And when you submit some instructions to the bank, that banks take some action, right? That's how I see it. Now with the open banking, that those trigger points, what was originally in the control of bank, they have kind of been moved out, right? Or moved out in the sense that actually it's a system or an application which can trigger those action items, just not within the bank's boundary. When I say bank's boundary, it's within the fintech community, the app which consumer is using, and then dispatching things to the bank. So think it like, it's probably comparable to like even a check kind of thing, right? I mean, we check is external enabler, which consumers sign and, deposit it, and then it automatically is processed, right? So open banking is the similar kind of thing, which is saying that actually these trigger points cannot be just confined to the bank systems. They need to be outsourced. Now, how they're going to be outsourced is obviously APIs with the control, and I think the other term which I think we use is consent of the consumer, right? What you are consenting to share and agree with the fintech or the third parties, right? So, that concept of that only you can trigger these things within the bank premises, whether it's a branch or their systems, right? That has been, I would say, opened up again with the API standards, and which enable the consumer to use alternative means to initiate. Okay, so it's the initiation part. And then banks receive those instructions. Now, whether they use ACH, we have other schemes or SWIFT platforms to move money. That's not what I, as a consumer, honestly is concerned with. Okay, all I'm concerned is what is that entry point which I can touch base with my bank and do the things which I probably can do directly or indirectly. Right? So UPI is a payments platform. Certainly, it's one of the best. Comparative to that is, in Europe, we call it SEPA. Okay, it's a single euro payment, I think, market, something like that it stands for. And that's the thing which is trying to achieve that, the euro, the movement of euro within all the European countries, pan-European countries, should be, easily done. because if each country develop their own payment system, we will have problems, right?
Yes.
Instead of each country having their own payment platforms, they're coming up with this SEPA concept. And that's what is comparable to the UPI. So yes, you're right. Europe is trying to catch up, but I'm sure they're going to catch up soon. But on alternately, the regulated open banking concept has really fueled all other demands of payment standardization, whether it is that ISO 20022 standard, which is being, the next step in natural evolution of how payments will be defined and how payments will, be done. But things are happening now much faster. The regulators and the governments are, very much appreciative of things which open banking can enable. And again, don't forget that it's all about safeguarding consumer, bringing competition to the market, and obviously just shaking up the things, right? Because incumbents, like anything, whether it's a government or banks, then there become a this default inherent thing that we are the best, we know best, so that need to be always in some time, I think, shake up, wake up. So I think this is the shake up, wake up movement for the banks. And the other thing which has happened is that banks of different sizes have taken it as differently. Some took it as a regulatory project, some of them took it like no, this is I would say digital transformation project, one of its kind, right? So I would say, UPI, and we do have in Europe the SEPA comparison. But consumers, obviously, as you said, right, if we can do this all thing through the single place, it makes sense.
Right. Okay. So now that, COVID has come and it's there and it's going to stay and it's making a lot of disruptions, means disruptions in the sense, I would say, previously we used to always, try to, break in any new concept with the millennials, right? Somehow the demography of targeted customer is also changing. You have the older generation also now coming, those who are not the millennials, coming online as well now, because they also need to, serve their needs. In India, recently I was reading around 520 million new younger children base have joined the internet, and of course now there's a concept and a push of having account for every individual, right? Share scholarship money, etc. So how has actually COVID changed the whole open banking scenario? Has it accelerated it, or is it putting a halt? Because overall we see virtual banks, the licenses which were supposed to get granted to virtual banks, there is a stop because now governments are looking at solving other challenges first. But has it had that kind of a negative effect, or has it actually accelerated this adoption of open banking as such?
I think, to be honest, the way I see it is, or in my experience or understanding, I think it depended on where any country or jurisdiction happened to be during this phase of pandemic in relation to open banking. The countries like Canada, one example, they did it. They haven't started really. So they kind of paused it. So countries like Europe and UK especially, we are seeing other side. We are thinking that actually we are not going to stop. We're going to accelerate it. Okay. There are a lot of examples which came, at least in UK. I can't, the things which happened. So when our the finance minister, presented this COVID-19 various COVID-19 schemes to help businesses and individuals, there were a lot of fintechs. I can think of at least a dozen of fintechs who came forward that we can help you to understand the relationship or the data of a particular consumer, whether it's a business or it's a individual, in terms of how much intake they have, how much impact they're going to have, all those things. And they were quickly able to say that we can share some data or insight information about your targeted customer who you want to help through this pandemic. So again, I think because we had this instrument or tool in UK, those tools did help. And, so I would say COVID-19 has been listed as in some of the even surveys that has it started the digital transformation? Answer is yes. It's not the organization yet. And as it's like in some jurisdictions which haven't really started, they probably paused it. And they were thinking that it's better. They're trying to tackle the COVID-19 situation with the banks, obviously supporting the economy. But the justification like UK and Europe, no, we used it. We used to solve the problem of understanding how much impact and how to incentivize these businesses or individuals, right? Whether it is their I would say reduction in the tax, or whether it's actually direct payment. So all these things actually played at least positively in Europe or UK, where the government is taking help from fintechs, and fintechs are obviously up for helping government because they think they can actually, and I see it as I would say an opportunity, if jurisdiction or countries can take out of it, yes, they should it, because this thing will help steer away the next big economic downturn for whatsoever reason, right? If we have information on our easily accessible, and obviously extrapolated to the kind of information which the budget planning or people like the government and justice needed, then open banking will definitely have. On top of it, as like open finance is the next big thing, right? So the impact to various industries can obviously be gauged, right? I can think of like if there is an app which is tracking my activity on my investment and everything, or insurance and anything, that can be fed to some report, right? Because if I'm willing to share that, for example, travel insurances, right? I mean, there is no need for travel insurance, but how many people had a travel insurance? That can be inferred from my bank statement, honestly, right? Because there is a payment going out. So all those industry impact can be, measured and geared if there is a single platform or a single application which is doing that, and then say that, hey, this is real, right? And this is quantifiably measured. This is not a approximation. It's better than approximation, right?
Correct.
So I think, COVID-19, as bad it could be, but in some shape or form, it is actually pushing up the boundaries of data sharing, and it is challenging the companies and organizations to think about it and say, actually, no, we're gonna take steps so that if we happen this kind of thing situation comes in the near future, we have tools to at least take informed decisions. So I say it is a positive thing in some situations.
Actually, one of the areas where even I see Asia is using open banking, or I wouldn't say like the full ecosystem or the full strength of eco banking, but to help the SMEs, because the SMEs, they have been really impacted by this, and SME as a sector really needs short-term loans, fast approvals, low interest-driven loans, and also the most important thing for them is grant of loans, because generally banks wouldn't go for short, fast grant of loans to the SMEs. But I think the government has also, I know in India they have, and I'm sure in other countries they are taking steps to use these data which is available, and also take the help of the players in the ecosystem, the fintech players and also the individual tech developers, to help and drive the adoption in that sense as such. So I think SMEs is another thing which open banking is really targeting.
No, absolutely. So just like I think the backbone of any economy is SMEs, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because the other players, where the small, the big players, they can still navigate through these crucial constraints. I mean, majority of will, some will perish, but SME is the one market which actually is the main fuel, the energy of the whole any economy, right? And if any government or things cannot support SMEs when there is a need, then that has a big long-term economical impact. I think now governments around the world are actually thinking what's the impact of this, and I think 2008 crash is gonna look smaller or minuscule as compared to what we're gonna face in next year. But the answer to that problem is SME market, because if they get going, then I think we wouldn't see this impact lasting longer. And quickly the governments can help with these loans, short-term loans. I mean, interestingly, the UK has launched a couple of these schemes already, and they have been going from bank to bank. Big banks got this approval of giving bridge loans, or what they call is exit out of COVID-19. There are a couple of schemes which has been launched. I'm pretty sure there's a similar scheme launched in Europe. But yes, SMEs are the fuel of market, because they are the one who will come with innovative ideas and interesting projects, and they be in the forefront of dealing with the small businesses, whether it is a flower shop or a tea coffee shop. So they need to be taken as a first priority to fix the economy in any shape. And if they get going as a like, I think the impacts can be mitigated or reduced at least in the period of coming years. And open banking can help this as well. Because if we get, it's like if we can have a detailed analysis of any business and understand their problems in terms of finance, then I'm sure you can help, right? So again, data is gonna be used and an instrument to be used to benefit the problems or challenges which SMEs is gonna face in coming years.
Right. And also, I think in the coming years, what will happen, and I think CDR is a very good example of Australia, where they are not trying to limit this opening of data to only financial services, but they are trying to introduce it to utility companies and I think to energy sector as well. And at the end of the day, as you're saying, right, the banking. So this is a very famous quote by Bill Gates, right, that banking is essential, banks are not, right? So effectively, we will see that the banks are there embedded in the system, but as a user, I'm not bothered about banks. I don't care about banks. So my idea is effectively, if you ever heard of Now Chomsky, he says that creation of ideas and demand by media, and now it will be creation of demand by data, right?
Yeah.
And we may end up having applications which just looks at my salary. They know the kind of salary I have and my spending habit. Maybe I'm not a high spender as compared to any junior analyst or any junior experienced person who might be in the lower band of salary but is a good spender. And we will be pushed towards buying consumer goods, and we will be pushed towards taking up good insurances, investments, and policies, etc. Yeah, I think that will be the whole future. But this whole ecosystem, and I was interested to know that the fintechs went to the government in UK and actually said how to use them. So fintechs play a very big role, right? So exactly what is this role that fintechs play and how important it is? And you being an owner of a company who is at the cusp and at the front end of doing these things, what are the challenges that you face when you go to a bank to actually work on your role that you're expected to?
Sure. Okay. So I think there are a couple of points here. So fintechs are the next gateways or doorways for this relationship. What we as a consumer gonna have with the banks. Okay. Now, whether big banks like it or not, but that's happening. Okay. The reason being why it is happening, because as consumers have changed. And kind of we are fed up and tired also with the traditional banking or whatever the relationship which we have, right? Examples could be as simple as overdraft fees. I mean, I give you an example. So there's an app which happened in UK. Says that actually, if you're gonna spend let's say there's an overdraft fee of £100 on your bank account, and they see that you're gonna be overdrafted next day. Okay, so what they can do automatically, if you have given a permission, right, using their app, they will say it's gonna cost you £100, or let's say with a £100 overdraft fees for anything. And what they say is actually, let's make sure that you don't end up paying £100. We're gonna give you the bridging loan. And you end up paying £50. Wow, why wouldn't I use that? Right, obviously. So as simple as overdraft fees, which we have taken it for granted that this is how banks should operate. With the years of banking, experiences what we had, our parents had, we took it that this is the normal way of banking, unless somebody said, no, why are you paying £100 overdraft? If there was an opportunity for somebody to credit money, even if it is because if somebody can give me £200 for a day or two while my salary paycheck comes, and then I'm not paying £100, I'm not paying overdraft fees to the bank, I'm giving fee or interest to a short-term lender, right? So is that use case possible with traditional banking? Absolutely no way. I wouldn't know I'm going to be charged. I wouldn't be able to arrange that short-term bridging loan. And banks obviously dislike it because overdraft is free. So see, that's as simple as that, right? We have been, I would say, brainwashed, right, with the years of banking. We thought this is how it is, right? And these are the use cases. Which is like fintech said, no, this is absolutely nonsense. Why would you charge when we can have this? And obviously, why they can do it? Because they have seen your history. Okay, so obviously, inherently fintech is taking some risk, but then it is more calculated risk. They have seen through your history of spending, and they say that you wouldn't be, so what essentially that kind of situation gonna do is that they can reliably tell that you're gonna pay it back on your salary when it is credited to your account, right? So they can take the whole principal and obviously make the margin, but which is obviously less than the overdraft fee, right? So as like why? Because these are the kind of use cases, and I mean, I'm not a payment expert myself, right? So our company Openitio, it specializes in technology. As of now, the first wave of product which we have is actually trying to enable banking as what we call open banking. Okay, so we are trying to we have solutions and product and solutions which actually make banks what I call open banking compliant. Right. So that's where say that actually if we are following the regulatory guidelines and we are making the banking interfaces. So there are two interfaces which we generally talk about, right? One is the API interface, which is the expected future interface, the future, and then is existing one which we call is existing banking interface, which happen to be website. So we are trying to again regulate that system also, so that when a fintech comes, we can prove who the fintech is. So again, going back to that regulated concept, we all know banks are regulated. I think inherently we know that whether we actively think about it, we know that there is somebody who's gonna safeguard our account to some extent, right? So that's the concept. But that concept doesn't come naturally to fintechs. Sometimes we think, hold on, what is this company? Where it is based out of? Is it based out of I don't know, some bad company or organization? So that trust needed to be bought for the fintech community, and that's where the regulation plays. So if you ask me, regulation is not just saying banks to open up; it is enforcing controls of the fintechs as well. That hey, you want to get hold of data, you need to go through the certification process or checks and balances process, and then you need to prove your credentials, digital credentials, when you're gonna actually ask for the customer data. So the challenges is being solved by open banking with all these problems, right? And in terms of what we face when we deal with banks, fundamentally, it's not just the technology. Honestly, technology is easy part. It's the what I call is mindset. The managerial mindset, the business mindset. Why should we do it? So when we work with banks, we try to turn this regulation into what we call is competitive angle. Right? It's not all lost for the banks. I mean, I think we haven't said that. It's not lost for the bank, but they will be lost if they don't take this as an opportunity rather than a regulation. So given that data sharing is obviously being mandated, but it's not that they are losing money. They can still make money. Okay, it's regulated. There are concept of monetization these APIs. Okay, because why should a bank facilitate a third party to take away these overdraft fees or some other kind of fees when they are not getting any back? No. Okay, so that's not the case, right? Banks do have a mechanism to recover their investment cost, and they will gain enormously in long term. Now, long term in my mind is 5 to 10 years. Okay, any system or framework or technology to become a standard and assimilated into economies and system will generally take 5 to 10 years, especially banking, because it has been stuck for quite a while. But I believe in next 5 years, we will see fundamental shift in how the banks think, how they think banking relationship with consumer need to change. And as a part of it, I'm sure some will succeed and some will definitely perish for one or another reason, right? So, the banking systems are other challenge which we face. Your example of an Indian bank upgrading the system, probably they are gearing towards what open banking might ask them to do. Because so one thing is data sharing. Can you do it at speed? Can you do it consistently? Can you do reliably? So all those questions cannot be answered with the old systems. So it's sometimes the technology system, sometimes it's the management, the mindset of the person who's owning these product and services. Say, why should I do it? Okay, fine, we will do it regularly. But if they can think it like they can get better out of it and come a stronger bank and serve their consumer better, then I think there's a win-win situation, right? There is a money in making, obviously. It may not be the traditional way. The other example which I think I can give you is this. We touched about the money movement, right? Banks have to pay fees to credit card companies, and that's quite a lot of fees. It's not small margin. But if the banks can move money from A to B, there's no middleman, they save. Okay, so it's not black or totally blackout for banks. They just need to open up their eyes, say that actually no. It might be initial hiccup, but it has long-term benefits for them as well.
Right. And also maybe as a result of this, the banks can focus on some of their basic work and leave the innovation to the community which is known for doing innovation. Because this is one of the things which I was working on a course for AI for everyone by deeplearning.ai. So Andrew Ng was giving that course, and what he said is that everybody is on the drum of making, we should do AI projects, we should use AI, ML, etc. But the first thing is you need to understand whether you have the capability to, do these projects or not. What does it mean to do these projects? Whether you do it in-house or whether you let it go outside. So DBS, for example, is a classic case which has, used the best of both of worlds, right? So DBS has more than 50% of their employees as tech employees, and if you look at their development, 85% is in-house as compared to out-house. But at the same time, it has created a very good ecosystem for fintechs to participate with them. Similarly goes for ICICI, Axis Bank, the banks, OCBC, who have actually ANZ, who have actually done really well in the market till date and have taken initiatives. So yeah, I agree to that banks have a benefit, and once that change management area, that blockage changes.
The cultural shift.
Yes. Because they are yet to understand exactly, with the changing dynamics, what their role is. Like for example, in India, I would first expect State Bank of India to help open up banking accounts and leave the innovation to a certain set of people which is expertise on that, rather than SBI driving it. Because I know SBI wouldn't have that kind of advantage internally to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm not totally criticizing the banks that they cannot innovate. DBS, you said, classic example.
Yeah.
We do have similar example in Europe or UK as well. Banks who have evolved, who have really thought about it, and then from the day one, they never thought about it about the regulatory project. Okay, so unfortunately, when we say regulatory project, the first thing comes is like a bad. Oh, we must do it. It's like a punishment. It's like a punishment. We have to do it for somebody else's benefit. That thing is not absolutely true. It's all about what we call is what's your perspective on it. Do you really want to see the brighter side, or you just want to talk about the dark side? Now, DBS is prime example in APAC, right? Obviously there is going to be some disruption, right? For example, there is a disruption that branch banking, the location-based banking, is kind of a dead almost. Right. we as like we need a relationship, but we don't need a physical relationship, right? We don't need to go to the bank branch. I don't even remember when was the last time I went. Probably some use case where they said, no, you must come here, you should know where we exist on high street. Okay, so that's true. One thing which I think I should mention is, you talked about the older consumer or the younger consumer who are not educated or smart. I would not say smart. I would say they are kind of bit late on catching technology, or for good or bad reason they cannot consume it, right? So thing which open banking can support. For example, I tell you the something like this, right? So our parents or grandparents still have bank accounts, right?
Mhm.
But how do you safeguard their bank accounts can be not be frauded and hacked, or let's say fraud is the general term. Interestingly, open banking can give them a capability to delegate again, just like power of attorney. You delegate your rights to somebody who can handle on your behalf. So our senior citizens are still the custodian of that bank account, but they give me a right to say, actually, you take decision and you just call me, right? So, for example, as like those push notifications, right? Some of the senior citizens would not be able to understand, or let's say they're not smartphone, people. They have their own, way of interacting with society and the bank. So those things have been delegated to people like us. They say, hey, would you take care of my bank account? Of course, right? It's not that I am going to wipe his account, but I can make sure that nothing bad happened to his account, because fraud, identity thefts are also on a rise. And open banking can genuinely solve that use case for the vulnerable generation. Now, vulnerable for any reason, whether it is education or lack of understanding of how the new era of open banking or these technologies work. But it genuinely solves those use cases that actually, yes, you can delegate, and then I am like a guardian of your bank account. You are the owner, but I am the guardian, and I can call you later on, say, hey, this is your transactions were, and I think these were your monthly recurring. And if there's a suspicion, I can always ask them, did you shop this? I got a notification. So there are interesting use cases which were thought beyond solvable, but now they can be solved, and they are possible because of open banking.
Right. Right. So this is kind of the future that we are looking at. I think that was one of my last questions, that exactly how do we see all these ecosystems working together to enable a future. And I think that really sums it up, that now we will have not only a particular set of generation, but a larger audience, which also kind of solves this customer reach problem for banks as well, because banks have to play around with similar set of banking population. And how much ever we talk about banking the unbanked, it's not easy, right? So with these solutions, and with fintechs playing a greater role, the regulators making sure that the participants are actually crossing the security and compliance requirements, the banks becoming aware that how to use the data, what are the benefits if they get lay off some of the work to these innovators, and they will achieve by being in that ecosystem. And last but not least, consumers becoming truly the authoritative decision maker of their data is what the future will be about in a nutshell. And I think that you will agree on that.
Absolutely, Minakshi. So, I think we are moving from what we know is open banking to open finance. Now, what does open finance? It will obviously vary on consumer to consumer. Open finance is nothing for a child. Open finance for a teenager or a university student have a different meaning. Open finance for a person like me who has a job and mortgage to pay and pensions to look after, I have a different relationship. And once I'm a senior citizen, then I probably have a different kind of relationship. So that open finance is the next big natural step. So you touch base on that Australian thing, the CDR, the consumer data right. Absolutely. So that is one way of doing, I would say, open economy. I wouldn't even stop it. I mean, the way I see it, what they are trying to do is what I feel is open economy. Okay, for the citizens. Whereas Europe did bit opposite. We are doing small steps. We are saying, no, we don't know what the bigger picture look like, but we can definitely solve a smaller set of use cases, and that use case happen to be just your payment accounts. So whether you start with a bigger picture or whether you start with a smaller picture, at the end, they're both going to converge. And that convergence is data sharing across the industry sectors. And again, at the end of the day, the consumer is going to be benefited. So I think it'd be interesting to see which approach was better, the CDR, the Australians, or the people who are thinking, let's start small, let's make it, bubble it for some years, and let's see what it brings to the next step, right? So yeah, I'm up for this game. And and I see that there is a comparison in other jurisdictions which are trying to leapfrog or understand what it is, challenges, benefits, all that. So these are two, I think, different side of the same paradigm, right? Do all, start big, try to cover everything, but then we over here are thinking start small, make it robust, resilient, sustainable, then move to the next use case. So UK, regulators are already looking to open finance, the same model, how they could apply to insurance and other product and services from the financial sector.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you, Bhupinder. I think we thought of a half an hour discussion, but we have come to an 1 hour.
Yeah.
And once we start talking, now that we talk about open finance, maybe we need to dedicate a session on that and understand how things are going to shape up. But overall, for the audience, I think Bhupinder will be there for some more such discussions. And the idea is to have some very nice topics and insights, because you're working at that moment, what is there, what is happening, what are the challenges. And this discussion was really fruitful. It really matches with a lot of analysis which I have done, while working for this open banking concept and trying to understand the whole ecosystem. And also at the same time, it also, lets me think that, okay, when we talk about data scraping, is it actually that's what is doing, driving right now? Whether we need to look at this data scraping, because I know there are a lot of issues that come up in Europe. GDPR is there. In India, we are trying to set up a data law. So a lot of things we can actually take up and kind of look at into it in a detailed manner. Yeah, thank you, Bhupinder. Thank you so much. And audience, please look forward for more sessions with him. And I will also be looking forward. It was really an interesting conversation.
Thanks, Minakshi. It was lovely talking to you. Looking forward to do more sessions like this.
Yeah. We will. It's really fun to have this kind of conversations. Right. Thank you.
Bye.